Hey everyone, I'm Nick, and in this episode of Python 3 Crash Course, we're going to be taking a look at a convenience feature in Python in terms of how we can make new lists. So let's go ahead and open up our example. It's going to be called List Comprehension. Right, so when we're making lists, sometimes, in these examples will be relatively simple lists, but we see we can oftentimes compact, a multi-line list initialization with just a single line, and we can also filter lists to create new lists in a single line. Right, so in this case, let's say we want to create a list of numbers from 1 to 10, but we want to square them, right? So a naive way of doing this would just to say, okay, well, for I in range 10, so that'll give us numbers 0 through 9 inclusive. Right, so let's go ahead and then just square them, right? So we'll append to this simple list I, and then star is, again, that's how we do power, right? So I to the power 2, so squared, right? And then we'll go ahead and print out our simple list. And then, if we want to say filter this list, right? So we want to say, okay, well, I want to create a new list, but only the even numbers of the original list. Well, one way we can do this is to say, for number in simple list, we'll go ahead and check using an if statement if the number mod 2, right, so using the modulo operator, which will give us the remainder. So if the number modulo 2 is equal to 0, this is for even numbers, so 2 divided by 2 doesn't have a remainder, 4 divided by 2 doesn't have a remainder, etc. So all even numbers don't have remainders when we're dividing by 2. Right, we'll go ahead and just append that number to our evens list, and we'll see that we'll get a list of 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. Right, so all the even numbers that were in that original list, or rather, it'd be 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, but squared. Right. Okay. So the next thing is, well, we can actually compact this into a single line, right? And that's using this idea of list comprehension, right? So we can do both of these operations, creation and filtering, using list comprehension. So in this case, the format of this is we'll go ahead and start with our brackets for our list, right? And then we'll have the value that we're going to put in the list, right? So we know that we want I to the power of 2, and then we have for I in range of 10, right? So this will give us numbers 0 through 9. And what will happen is that every iteration of this for loop, right, so this I will go here and it will get squared and then it'll go to the next iteration. But it will end up filling this array with different elements for each iteration of this for loop, right? So we'll get the exact same list of 0 squared, 1 squared, 2 squared, 3 squared, 4 squared, etc. But now in a single line instead of 2 lines like we had up here. Now another thing we can do in terms of filtering, right, we can do filtering the exact same way, right? So this time we want to do list comprehension. So our first step is just to say, I for I in list comp, right? And that's the name of the list we made right here. Now, if we just did this and left it off, this would just give us a duplicate of our list. Now, we can add a condition to the end over here, and this is what we'll use for filtering, right? So we can say I for I in list comp if I mod 2 is equal to 0, right? So we're only going to add something to this list, right, if mod 2 is equal to 0. But again, instead of the 3 lines we have up here, we're doing it in a single line, right? So, and the readability is fairly good, right? So we can understand what this is going to do fairly easily in a single line. And we'll go ahead and print that out. But we can do even more complicated things with list comprehension. Let's say, we want to add each of the numbers of one list to each of the numbers of the other list, right? So we want to do 10 plus 20, 10 plus 40, 10 plus 60, and we want to do 20 plus 20, 20 plus 40, 20 plus 60. So we can actually have nested loops in list comprehension, right? So in this case, we'll have x plus y, and then we'll have 2 loops. We'll have for x in this list of 10, 20, and 30, for y in 20, 40, and 60. So what this will do is we'll first have a value of x, right? So x will be 10, and then we'll go through each of the values of y. So it's just like if we had, for x in, 10, 20, and 30, and then on another line, right below it, we had for y in 20, 40, 60. So the equivalent we can go ahead and just kind of sketch that out. So it'd be, for x in, 10, 20, 30, and then for y in 20, 40, 60, right? And then we could have, you know, x plus y, right? And we could append this to some new array, maybe called nested loop. But you see, we can do the exact same thing again in just a single line of code, right? So we'll do 10 plus 20, 10 plus 40, 10 plus 60, then 20 plus 20, 20 plus 40, 20 plus 60, right? And so the x and y that we're using for each of these loops, we can just pull out, and that will be the element right here that gets added to this list. All right, so let's go ahead and see what this does when we go ahead and run it, right? So we'll call this with Python3 listComprehension.py. And we see with our simple list, right, we just create these values squared, right? So 0 squared, 1 squared, 2 squared, all the way up to 9 squared. Then we filter it just with a simple for loop and then a conditional statement with an if statement. And we get 0, 4, 16, 36, and 64, which are all the even numbers of this original list. Then we see that using list comprehension in a single line, we can do exactly what we did with this simple list. And likewise, we can filter it in a single line, just like we did for, you know, this naive implementation. And then over here, we've got, of course, our example where we had nested for loops, right? So we had, you know, 10 plus 20, 10 plus 40, 10 plus 60, and then we had 20 plus 20, 20 plus 40, 20 plus 60, and then we had 30 plus 20, 30 plus 40, and then 30 plus 60, right? So we're able to create this list with nested loops, again, in a single line, and it was still fairly readable. And that's one of the key advantages of using list comprehension for creating lists, and also, like we saw with this evens, for filtering lists to create new lists. All right, so that's going to do it for this example in Python 3. As always, feel free to check out all this code at github.com/coffeebeforearch, and as well as any of the other series like C++ Crash Course, CUDA Programming, where we look at GPU programming, Practical Parallelism in C++, where we look at, you know, how to write parallel C++ code using things like pthreads and MPI, as well as some other courses on, say, data structures and algorithms and object-oriented code design. But we looked at Python 3 Crash Course today. Under Fundamental Concepts, you can find under Miscellaneous this example for list comprehension. So feel free to download this and play around with it. Let me know if you have any questions or if there's any subjects in Python that you would like me to cover more. I'd be happy to help you with that. As always, I'm Nick, and I hope you have a nice day.